The call came in at 3:47 a.m. Sarah's fingers froze over the keyboard. The voice on the line wasn't human. It spoke in frequencies that made her teeth ache, words that tasted like copper pennies and burnt ozone. 911, what's your emergency? Silence. Then breathing that sounded like wind through a graveyard. The caller ID showed coordinates that didn't exist, a location that fell between the cracks of every map. Sarah's training manual sat open beside her. Page 847. The page they told her to never read, but tonight she had to. Rule number 1, never ask about the breathing. Rule number 2, never trace calls from Zone 7. Rule number 3, if they speak in numbers, hang up immediately. The voice returned, cold as January rain. 7, 7, 7. Sarah's hand trembled over the disconnect button. Her supervisor's words echoed in her mind. Some calls aren't meant to be answered. Some emergencies aren't meant to be solved. The fluorescent lights above her desk began to flicker. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. On her screen, new coordinates appeared. A farmhouse in Nebraska. A family of 4, all reported missing 3 days ago. The breathing stopped. Help. Us. 2 words that shattered everything Sarah thought she knew about her job, because the voice belonged to Emily Morrison. Age 7, confirmed dead for 72 hours. Sarah's finger hovered over the emergency dispatch button. Protocol demanded she follow the rules, the strange, terrifying rules that kept operators like her alive. But Emily Morrison was calling for help, from somewhere that shouldn't exist. The call timer showed 00:47. In 13 seconds, the system would auto-disconnect. Standard procedure for Zone 7 calls. Sarah had 13 seconds to decide, follow the rules that protected her, or break protocol for a dead little girl. The lights went out. In the darkness, Emily's voice whispered one final word. Please. Sarah's finger moved toward the button. But which button would she choose? And what happened to the last operator who broke the rules for Zone 7? Since 1968, America's 911 system has stood as our final lifeline, a voice in the darkness when everything falls apart. But what happens when that voice belongs to something else entirely? Deep within classified government facilities, a different kind of emergency response operates in the shadows. Federal 911 operators handle calls that never make the news. Calls that violate everything we think we know about reality. The recruitment process is surgical. Psychological evaluations that probe deeper than military clearance. Background checks that span generations. They're not just hiring operators, they're selecting guardians of impossible secrets. The pay is extraordinary. 6 figures to start, full medical, pension that sets you up for life. There's just one catch. The rules. Rule number 1, never question what you hear. Rule number 2, some calls require immediate termination. Rule number 3, certain phrases trigger protocols you cannot discuss. Rule number 4, if you hear screaming that doesn't sound human, follow the red binder. These aren't suggestions. They're survival instructions. Because in the sterile halls of Federal Emergency Response Division 7, operators don't just take calls about car accidents and heart attacks. They field reports from places that don't exist on any map. From military installations conducting experiments that violate the Geneva Convention. From research facilities where the screaming never stops. The fluorescent lights hum with electrical tension. The air tastes metallic, recycled through filters that scrub out more than just dust. Coffee grows cold in styrofoam cups as operators stare at screens displaying caller locations that register as classified. Every shift, someone breaks. Every month, someone disappears. The turnover rate is 340% annually. Most operators last 6 weeks before requesting transfer. The lucky ones get reassigned to regular emergency dispatch. The others simply vanish from payroll, their security clearances revoked, their employment records sealed. But Sarah Chen thought she was different. She'd survived 2 tours in Afghanistan as a communications specialist. She'd handled crisis calls for the Red Cross during Hurricane Katrina. She'd seen humanity at its worst and maintained her composure. She had no idea what was waiting for her in that windowless building outside Quantico. No idea that some emergencies aren't meant to be answered. 3 weeks earlier, Sarah sat in a sterile conference room, signing documents that would change everything. But the real horror hadn't even begun. Sarah's fingers trembled as she opened the crimson binder marked Classified Level 7, Clearance Only. The manual's pages felt different. Heavier, like they carried the weight of secrets that could crush souls. Call type 47 Alpha, she read aloud, her voice barely a whisper in the sterile government facility. Caller reports family member exhibiting impossible behaviors. Response: immediate transfer to Department of Anomalous Events. The fluorescent lights above buzzed with an electric menace. Sarah's supervisor had warned her about this manual during her first week. Some calls don't get ambulances, he'd said, his eyes hollow. Some calls get other responses. Sarah flipped to the next page. Call type 52 Bravo made her stomach lurch. Caller reports deceased individual making contact. Response: deploy Containment Unit 7. Under no circumstances acknowledge the caller's claims as valid. The air conditioning kicked in, sending a chill down her spine that had nothing to do with temperature. Page after page revealed horrors disguised as bureaucratic procedure. Call type 63 Charlie. Reports of children with no reflections. Call type 71 Delta. Caller claims to be calling from a location that doesn't exist. Each entry included the same chilling addendum. Operator must maintain standard emergency protocols while secretly initiating specialized response teams. Sarah's hand shook as she realized the truth. Every 911 operator wasn't just saving lives, they were gatekeepers, guarding the thin line between the world people believed in and the world that actually existed. The manual's final section made her blood freeze. Call type 99 Omega. Caller reports operator behavior as unusual or wrong. Response: immediate termination of operator, memory adjustment for caller. Sarah slammed the binder shut, her breath coming in sharp gasps. She understood now why her predecessor had disappeared without explanation, why the training emphasized absolute discretion above all else. The phone on her desk began to ring. Sarah stared at the caller ID display. It showed her own home number, but she was here, at work, alone. The ringing continued, each tone echoing through the empty dispatch center like a death knell. Sarah's training kicked in. She reached for the headset, knowing that some calls changed everything. Some calls revealed that the operators themselves weren't entirely human, but the real horror hadn't even begun. The call came in at 3:47 a.m. Sarah's fingers hovered over the keyboard, the fluorescent lights humming overhead like dying insects. The caller ID showed only zeros. 1. What's your emergency? Silence. Then breathing. Hello? I need your location. They're in the basement. A woman's voice, barely a whisper. Please. They've been down there for days. Sarah's training kicked in. Location first. Always. Location first. Ma'am, I need your address. Where are you calling from? Building 7, Sublevel 3, Federal Plaza. Sarah's blood turned to ice water. Federal Plaza was government property. Restricted access. The kind of place that didn't appear on her dispatch maps. Rule 23 flashed in her mind. Never dispatch to unlisted federal coordinates without clearance. Ma'am, I'm going to need to transfer you. No! The scream made Sarah's headset crackle. They'll know I called. The screaming. God, the screaming won't stop. Sarah's supervisor, Marcus, appeared behind her station. His face was stone. He shook his head slowly. Rule 23? Always follow Rule 23. Ma'am, I'm transferring you to the appropriate department. Wait! The woman's voice cracked. Do you have children? Sarah's hand froze over the transfer button. Her daughter's photo smiled up from her desk. Emma, age 7, missing 2 front teeth. Ma'am, because they do. Had. The children down here, they're so small. The line went dead. Sarah stared at the blank screen, her heart hammering against her ribs. The call had lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Long enough to trace, but there was no trace. No record. The system showed she'd been idle for the past 5 minutes. Marcus leaned over her shoulder. His breath smelled like stale coffee and something else. Something metallic. Rough night? He asked. Sarah's mouth felt like sandpaper. Just a prank call. Good. Marcus straightened. Remember, Sarah, some calls never happen. Some buildings don't exist. Some screams. He paused, his eyes reflecting the monitor's blue glow. Some screams are just the wind. Sarah nodded, but her hands were shaking. She looked at Emma's photo again. Those trusting eyes. At 4:15 a.m., her computer chimed. New message from administration. Operator Chapter 2847, rule violation detected. Report to room 101 immediately. Sarah's chair creaked as she stood. The hallway stretched before her like a throat. But what she found in room 101 would make the basement screams seem like lullabies. The call came in at 3:47 a.m. Sarah's fingers hovered over the keyboard as the voice crackled through her headset. Male. Mid-30s. Breathing heavy. And, what's your emergency? There's something in my house. Standard protocol. Location first. Nature of threat second. But as Sarah pulled up the address, her blood went cold. 4-7 Blackwood Drive. The red flag flashed across her screen immediately. Code 7 location. Do not dispatch, do not log, transfer to special operations, but the man was still talking. It's in the walls. I can hear it moving, scratching. My daughter, she won't stop screaming. Sarah's training kicked in. 3 years of government protocols drilled into her skull. Rule 847. Any call from a Code 7 address must be immediately transferred without engagement. Her finger moved toward the transfer button. Please, you have to help us. It's getting louder. The scratching is getting... A child's scream pierced through the static. High-pitched, terrified. The kind of sound that carved itself into your memory. Sarah froze. Rule 847 was absolute. No exceptions, no questions. She'd seen operators fired for less, blacklisted from government work forever, but that scream... Sir, I need you to stay calm. Can you get to your daughter? The words left her mouth before she could stop them. Protocol violation, career suicide. But her fingers were already typing, pulling up emergency services in the area. I can't. The hallway. There's something blocking it. Oh God, it's moving. Sarah's supervisor, Martinez, appeared behind her station. She could feel his eyes on her screen, on the flashing red warning, on the dispatch request she was typing. Henderson. His voice was ice. Transfer that call, now. The man's breathing grew more ragged. The scratching stopped. Why did it stop? That's worse, isn't it? When it stops, Sarah's hand trembled over the mouse. One click and she'd follow protocol, save her career, keep her security clearance. Another scream echoed through the line. Closer this time. More desperate. Sir, I'm dispatching units to your location right now. Martinez lunged for her workstation, but Sarah was faster. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, sending the dispatch before he could stop her. The line went dead. Complete silence. Martinez stood behind her, his face pale in the monitor's glow. Around the call center, other operators had stopped working. Everyone was staring. "You have no idea what you just did," Martinez whispered. But Sarah was already pulling up the dispatch tracking. Units were en route. ETA, 12 minutes. Then her computer screen flickered. The address vanished from the system. The call log deleted itself. Even the dispatch request disappeared as if it had never existed. Blackwood Drive was gone. But the emergency units were still heading there. 6 months into my tenure as a federal 911 operator, I thought I'd seen everything. The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar tune. The smell of burnt coffee and industrial disinfectant clung to every surface. But today felt different. A manila envelope appeared on my desk during my lunch break. No postmark, no delivery signature, just my name written in block letters that seemed to bleed into the paper. Inside, a single black key card and coordinates. The coordinates led to sub-level 7, a floor that didn't exist on any building directory I'd ever seen. The elevator descended past familiar levels, past the break room on 3, past the supervisor offices on 2, past the main call center on 1, then it kept going. The doors opened to reveal a corridor bathed in red emergency lighting. The air tasted metallic. Copper pennies and fear. Room 713 sat at the end of the hall like a mouth waiting to swallow secrets. The keycard beeped. Green light. The door whispered open. Inside, 12 operators I'd never seen before. Their headsets gleamed black instead of our standard gray. Their screens showed calls I couldn't understand. "Welcome to Shadow Department," said a woman without turning around. Her voice carried the weight of classified horrors. "You've been selected." The screens flickered with incoming calls. But these weren't normal emergencies. "One, what's your emergency?" "The subjects in Sector 7 are becoming aggressive. We need immediate containment." "Copy that. Dispatching Protocol Black to your location." My blood turned to ice water. Protocol Black wasn't in any manual I'd memorized. Another operator fielded a call. 911, what's your emergency?" "We have a breach in the memory suppression unit. Citizens are starting to remember things they shouldn't." "Understood. Initiating cognitive reset procedures for Grid Section 12. The woman finally turned. Her eyes held the exhaustion of someone who'd seen democracy die in real time. "Every call you've taken upstairs was training," she said. "Every emergency you've handled was practice for this moment." She gestured to an empty workstation, the chair still warm from its previous occupant. "The real emergencies happen down here, the ones the public can never know about, the ones that keep the illusion of normalcy alive." My hands trembled as she handed me the black headset. Rule 847. What happens in Shadow Department stays buried with Shadow Department. The phone rang. But what I heard on that first call would make me question everything I thought I knew about our government. The manila folder arrived on my desk at 3:17 a.m. No delivery slip. No authorization code. Just yellowed paper that smelled like cigarettes and old coffee. Inside, 17 pages of handwritten notes. Names I'd never heard, locations that didn't exist on any map, and phone numbers with area codes that made my stomach turn cold. Rule 47. I whispered, reading the first page. Calls from Zone 7 require immediate disconnection. No exceptions. No logging. Zone 7. I'd been working dispatch for 8 years. Never heard of Zone 7. The handwriting was shaky, desperate, like someone writing in the dark. They watched the logs, the notes continued. Every call traced, every word recorded, but some calls never happened. My hands trembled as I turned the page. A list of dates, times, call durations of exactly 43 seconds, all disconnected, all marked with the same notation. System error, no record, But I remembered those calls, the woman screaming about lights in the sky, the man begging us to stop the experiments, the child who whispered coordinates before the line went dead. 43 seconds each. Just like the notes said, Sarah Chen knows, the final page read, "She's been tracking the patterns. They transferred her to night shift to keep her quiet. But she's still watching." Sarah Chen, the operator who trained me, who disappeared last month after asking too many questions about our call routing system. I flipped to the back cover. A phone number written in red ink. Below it, 3 words that made my blood freeze. "When you're ready." The fluorescent lights above my cubicle flickered. Once. Twice. I looked around the dispatch center. Empty, except for Martinez at Station 12. His screen glowed blue in the darkness, casting shadows across his face. But Martinez was supposed to be on vacation this week. I'd seen his time-off request myself. Slowly, he turned toward me. His eyes reflected the screen light like mirrors. Cold, unblinking. He smiled. Then my phone rang. The caller ID showed impossible numbers, letters mixed with digits, symbols that hurt to look at. 43 seconds on the timer. Counting down. I reached for the disconnect button, but Martinez was already walking toward my station. The emergency alert pierced through Sarah's headset at 3:47 a.m., code black. Facility 7. Her fingers trembled as she pulled up the classified protocols. The screen bathed her face in sickly green light, casting shadows that danced like warnings across the empty dispatch center. Rule 23. During Code Black events, all standard emergency response is suspended. The caller's voice crackled through static. Male, panicked, breathing like he'd been running for his life. "They're out," he whispered. "Jesus Christ, they're all out." Sarah's training kicked in. Never ask what. Never ask who. Just follow the script. "Sir, please remain calm. I'm dispatching containment units to your location." But there was no location. The GPS showed nothing but empty desert where Facility 7 should have been, like it had been scrubbed from existence. The man's breathing grew ragged. "You don't understand. The things they kept down there, the experiments." Rule 24. If a caller mentions experiments, immediately transfer to Department EX. Sarah's hand hovered over the transfer button, but Department X's line was dead, had been dead for 3 hours. Through her headset, she heard something that made her blood freeze. Footsteps, heavy, metallic, getting closer to the caller. "They're coming back," he sobbed. "Oh God, they're coming back for me." The temperature in the dispatch center plummeted. Sarah's breath formed clouds as she spoke into her microphone. "Sir, I need you to find somewhere to hide. Somewhere they can't." The line went silent. Not disconnected. Silent. Like someone had covered the phone with their hand. Then came the sound that would haunt Sarah's dreams. Low, guttural. Definitely not human. Rule 25. If you hear non-human vocalizations during a code black, evacuate immediately. Sarah's chair scraped against the floor as she stood. The emergency exit was 30 feet away. Might as well have been 30 miles, because the same sound she'd heard through the phone was now coming from directly behind her. The smell hit her first. Copper and decay. Like something that had been buried and dug up too many times. Sarah turned around slowly. The dispatch center was no longer empty, and what stood in the doorway wasn't listed in any government manual. But somehow, impossibly, it was wearing a badge. Sarah's hands trembled as she pulled up the classified database. 3 months into her government contract, she'd learned to follow the strange rules without question. But tonight felt different. The call came in at 2:47 a.m., a woman's voice, barely a whisper. "They're watching me through the cameras, all of them. even the ones that aren't supposed to exist. Sarah's training kicked in. Rule 15. Never acknowledge surveillance claims. Redirect to local emergency services, but then the caller said something that made Sarah's blood freeze. Tell Sarah Martinez her daughter walks to school on Maple Street every morning at 7:15. Sarah's breath caught. Her daughter, her address, information that shouldn't exist in any system. The line went dead. Her supervisor, Agent Morrison, appeared behind her workstation. His footsteps had been silent on the concrete floor. Interesting call, Martinez. The smell of his coffee mixed with the sterile air conditioning. Sarah's skin prickled with cold sweat. How did you... We monitor everything. Every keystroke, every breath, every heartbeat when you're scared. Morrison leaned closer. His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow felt louder than shouting. Did you think the rules were just suggestions? Rule 23, Martinez. Check your manual. Sarah's fingers shook as she flipped through the classified handbook. Page 47. Rule 23. Operators who receive personally targeted calls have been compromised. Immediate extraction protocols apply. The fluorescent lights above hummed with electrical tension. Around her, other operators continued taking calls. Their voices, mechanical, robotic. But their eyes... God, their eyes were all watching her now. Who are you people? Sarah whispered. Morrison smiled. The expression never reached his eyes. We're the ones who make sure the right calls get through, and the wrong ones disappear forever. He placed a black phone on her desk. It was ringing. Answer it, Martinez. Your final test. The caller ID showed her own home number. Sarah's hand hovered over the receiver. Through the reinforced windows, she could see black SUVs pulling into the parking lot. The phone kept ringing. Each tone felt like a countdown. Her daughter's voice echoed in her memory. Mommy, why do the nice men in suits watch our house? Sarah reached for the phone, but what she heard when she answered would shatter everything she thought she knew about her job. The voice on the other end was her own. The red phone rang at 3:47 a.m. Sarah's hand trembled as she reached for it. In 6 months as a federal 911 operator, she'd never heard that particular ringtone. Shrill, metallic, wrong. This is operator 7-749, she whispered into the receiver. Silence stretched like a held breath. Then static crackled, carrying something that made her skin crawl. Code Black protocol is now active, a mechanical voice announced. All standard procedures are suspended. The fluorescent lights above her workstation flickered once. Died, emergency lighting bathed the call center in blood-red shadows. Sarah's computer screen displayed a message she'd never seen before. Classified protocols engaged. Her supervisor, Martinez, appeared at her shoulder. His face was pale as bone. Listen carefully, he said, his voice barely audible over the hum of backup generators. For the next 12 hours, you follow only the instructions on your screen. No questions, no deviations. Sarah's throat felt like sandpaper. What about the regular emergency calls? There are no regular calls during Code Black. The first instruction appeared on her monitor. Incoming calls from area code 000 take priority, do not trace, do not record. Area code 00 didn't exist. Sarah's headset crackled to life. The caller ID showed impossible numbers. 00001. None, what's your emergency? She answered, following protocol. The voice that responded wasn't human. Too smooth, too perfect, like silk wrapped around broken glass. We have a containment breach at coordinates you are not authorized to know, it said. Dispatch no units. Log no reports. This call never happened. Sarah's fingers hovered over her keyboard. Every instinct screamed to document the call, to send help, to do her job. But the screen flashed a new message. Compliance is survival. Understood, she heard herself say. The line went dead. Martinez leaned closer, his breath hot against her ear. "How many calls like that have you taken tonight?" That was the first. "Check your call log." Sarah pulled up her records. Her blood turned to ice water. According to the system, she'd handled 47 code black calls in the past. Calls she had no memory of taking. The red phone rang again. As Sarah reached for it, she noticed something that made her stomach lurch. Her hands were covered in blood. But whose blood was it? And why couldn't she remember how it got there? Sarah's hands trembled as she stared at the disciplinary notice. 3 violations. 3 times she'd broken Protocol 7. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the supervisor's office. The air tasted metallic, like copper pennies and fear. "You answered calls during code black hours," Supervisor Martinez said, his voice flat as concrete. "You spoke to civilians when the system flagged them as restricted." Sarah's throat felt raw. They were dying. A woman trapped in her basement during the flood. A child calling about his unconscious mother. The protocols exist for a reason. But Sarah had seen the reason. She'd watched other operators follow the rules perfectly, watched them disconnect calls that came through during those mysterious blackout periods, watched them ignore the desperate voices that the system marked with red warning labels. She'd watched good people die in silence. "What happens to operators who break Protocol 7? Sarah asked. Martinez's fingers drummed against his desk. The sound echoed like distant gunshots. "Reassignment," he said. "To a different department. Different work." The way he said "different" made Sarah's skin crawl, like ice water dripping down her spine. "Where do they go?" "That's classified." Sarah thought about Jenkins. How he'd questioned the protocols last month. How his desk had been empty the next Monday. How nobody mentioned his name anymore, like he'd never existed. How his wife had called the main line, crying, asking why her husband hadn't come home. "I need you to understand something," Martinez continued. "The government doesn't make these rules arbitrarily. There are forces at work, situations you can't comprehend." He leaned forward. His breath smelled like coffee and secrets. "Some calls aren't meant to be answered. Some people aren't meant to be saved." Sarah's chest tightened. "Who decides that? People much higher than us." The office felt smaller now, the walls pressing inward like a closing fist. Martinez slid a document across the desk. The paper felt cold against Sarah's fingertips. "Sign this. Acknowledge your violations. Promise to follow protocols without question." Sarah stared at the words. Black ink on white paper. Simple and final. She thought about the woman in the basement. How her voice had grown weaker with each passing minute. How Sarah had stayed on the line anyway, whispering comfort into the darkness. How the woman had survived because someone cared enough to break the rules. "What if I don't sign?" Martinez's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Then you'll discover what happened to Jenkins." But as Sarah reached for the pen, the office door burst open. Sarah's hands trembled as she stared at the classified memo on her screen. Rule 47. If an operator discovers unauthorized surveillance of their own communications, they must report to Level 7 immediately. But Level 7 didn't exist. Not officially. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting sickly shadows across her workstation. Every keystroke she'd made for the past 6 months had been monitored. Every call she'd taken. Every rule she'd questioned. They knew about Marcus. The emergency exit sign glowed red in her peripheral vision. 23 steps to freedom. But freedom from what? The government that employed her, or something far worse? Her computer chimed. New message. Sarah Chen, report to sublevel B7. Immediately. The sender field was blank. The timestamp showed 3:33 a.m., but her clock read 2:47 a.m., time manipulation. Another rule she'd never been told about. She could smell the metallic tang of fear in her own sweat. The air conditioning whispered secrets through the vents above. Somewhere in this building, other operators sat in identical cubicles, following identical rules, never knowing they were being hunted by the very system they served. Sarah's badge trembled against the card reader. The elevator descended past to floors that shouldn't exist. B1, B2, B3. The numbers kept climbing downward. B7. The doors opened to reveal a sterile white corridor. No windows. No exit signs. Just endless fluorescent perfection stretching into darkness. Dr. Elizabeth Kane waited at the far end. The woman who'd recruited Sarah 5 years ago. The woman who'd promised her she'd be saving lives. "You've been asking questions, Sarah." Kane's voice echoed off the walls, multiplying into a chorus of accusations. Questions about calls that never happened, about rules that don't exist, about operators who disappear. Sarah's throat felt like sandpaper. "I followed protocol, every single rule. But you discovered Rule 0, didn't you?" The temperature dropped 10 degrees in an instant. Sarah's breath came out in visible puffs. Rule 0. The rule that governed all other rules. The rule that made everything else possible. "Every 911 operator eventually learns the truth," Kane continued, stepping closer. "That we don't just take emergency calls, we create them." Sarah's world tilted sideways. Every crisis, every disaster, every perfectly timed tragedy that shapes public opinion. "We don't respond to emergencies, Sarah. We manufacture them." The fluorescent lights began to flicker. "And now that you know, you have a choice to make." But the real horror hadn't even begun. The clock strikes midnight in the Federal Dispatch Center. Fluorescent lights hum overhead like dying insects. The air tastes metallic, recycled through ventilation systems that never sleep. Sarah's fingers hover over her keyboard, trembling. Rule 47 glows on her secondary monitor. Between 12 a.m. and 3 a.m., all calls marked Blackbird require immediate transfer to extension 28847. No questions, no logging. The phone rings. "One, what's your emergency?" "Please, they're in my house. I can hear them downstairs." The woman's voice cracks like breaking glass. Sarah's training kicks in. Location verification, unit dispatch, standard protocol. But then her screen flashes red. Blackbird. Her blood turns to ice water. The caller's address appears, 1247 Elm Street. The same address from the classified briefing 3 months ago. The house that officially doesn't exist. "Ma'am, I'm going to transfer you to—" "No, don't transfer me. They always transfer me. Please just send someone." Sarah's supervisor, Marcus, appears behind her like a shadow. His breath smells of coffee and something else. Something chemical. "Transfer it," he whispers. The woman screams. Glass shatters through the phone line. "They're coming up the stairs." Sarah's finger freezes over the transfer button. Every instinct screams to dispatch units, to save this woman, but Marcus's hand closes over hers. His grip burns like ice. "You know the rules, Sarah. Some calls aren't meant to be answered." The line goes silent. Dead air fills Sarah's headset like a tomb. Extension 2847 picks up on the first ring. No greeting, no identification, just breathing. Then a voice she recognizes. Dr. Elizabeth Kane from the Department of Psychological Operations. Subject Chapter 47B has been contained. Reset the simulation for tomorrow night. Simulation. Sarah's world tilts sideways. The woman's terror, the breaking glass, the screams, all of it. Recorded, scripted, performed. "Why?" Sarah whispers. Marcus leans closer. His smile cuts through the darkness like a blade. "Stress testing, Sarah. We need to know which operators will break protocol when emotions run high. Which ones will choose humanity over orders." The fluorescent light above her desk flickers and dies. Congratulations, you passed. But as Sarah stares at her reflection in the black computer screen, one question burns through her mind like acid. If that was just a test, what happens to the operators who fail? The phone rings again. Another Blackbird call. Another test. But this time, Sarah recognizes the voice on the other end. It's her own. The red phone screamed at 3:47 a.m. Sarah's hand trembled as she reached for it. Code Black calls only came through the classified line, the one connected directly to facilities that didn't officially exist. Emergency services. This is operator 779. Static crackled. Then a voice, barely human through electronic distortion. We have a containment breach at Site 19. Multiple casualties. Do not dispatch standard emergency services. Sarah's training kicked in. Rule 847. Code Black emergencies require Protocol 7 responses only. No ambulances, no fire trucks, no police, just silence. Copy that. What is your casualty count? 14 confirmed dead, 6 missing. The subjects have escaped containment. Subjects. That word made her stomach turn. In 3 years of taking these calls, she'd learned not to ask what the subjects were. The caller's breathing grew ragged. They're in the ventilation system now. We can hear them moving through the walls, scratching. Always scratching. Sarah's fingers flew across her keyboard, following the protocol she'd memorized but hoped never to use. No rescue teams would be dispatched. No medical assistance. Instead, she typed coordinates into a system that would send other things. Sir, help is en route. Estimated arrival in 47 minutes. 47 minutes. The man's voice cracked. We don't have 47 minutes. They're getting closer. I can smell them now. Like copper pennies and rotting meat. The line went quiet except for his shallow breathing. Then came the sound that would haunt Sarah's dreams for months. Metallic scraping. Growing louder. Closer. They're in the ceiling above me, he whispered. Oh God, they're right above me. I can see the tiles moving. Sarah gripped her headset. Sir, stay calm. Find a secure location and... A crash, screaming. Then wet, tearing sounds that no human throat should make. The line went dead. Sarah stared at her screen, watching the caller's location blink red. In 47 minutes, a cleanup crew would arrive. They'd sanitize everything, remove all evidence. By morning, Site 19 would never have existed. She reached for her logbook with shaking hands. Rule 851. All Code Black incidents must be recorded as false alarm, accidental activation. But as she wrote those words, her computer screen flickered. A new call was coming in. Another red phone. Another site, and this time the caller ID showed her own home address. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Sarah stared at her supervisor's empty desk. 3 days since Marcus had vanished. 3 days since the calls stopped coming through her line. The metallic taste of fear coated her tongue. Sarah. Agent Collins materialized behind her, his footsteps silent on the industrial carpet. Conference room. Now. The windowless room smelled of stale coffee and something else. Something chemical. Sweet. Sarah's hands trembled as she sat across from Collins and 2 men she'd never seen before. You've been asking questions, Collins said, sliding a manila folder across the table. About the calls. About the rules. Sarah's throat constricted. I just want to understand. Open it. Her fingers felt numb as she lifted the folder's edge. Inside, photographs. Dozens of them. Crime scenes. Bodies. Each tagged with a date, a time, a call numbers she recognized, calls she had taken. Every emergency you've handled in the past 6 months, Collins continued, his voice flat as concrete. Every time you followed the rules. Every time you didn't dispatch help immediately. The room spun. Sarah gripped the table's edge, feeling the cold metal bite into her palms. The 30-second delay rule for domestic violence calls. The verification protocol for suicide attempts. The geographic restrictions. Collins leaned forward. You thought they were bureaucratic inefficiency. Photograph after photograph. A woman's bruised face. A teenager's lifeless form. An elderly man collapsed on his kitchen floor. They weren't inefficiencies, Sarah. They were features. The chemical smell grew stronger. Formaldehyde, she realized. Like a morgue. We've been conducting a study. One of the unknown men spoke. Response time correlation with mortality rates, social impact assessment, population density optimization. Sarah's vision blurred. You're saying I've been participating in the largest behavioral experiment in American history, Collins finished. Every 911 operator in this facility, every call, every delay, all carefully orchestrated. The photographs seemed to pulse under the harsh lights. Marcus found out, Sarah whispered. Marcus made poor choices. Sarah stood on shaking legs. The room tilted. The faces around the table watched her with clinical detachment. How many? She asked. How many what? How many people died because I followed your rules? Collins smiled. It was the coldest thing Sarah had ever seen. That's not the question you should be asking. He reached for another folder. The question is, how many more will die if you don't keep following them? The call came in at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday that would change everything. Sarah's hands trembled as the familiar static crackled through her headset. But this time the voice on the other end wasn't human. Emergency services, what's your location? Facility 7 Alpha. We have a code black situation. Her blood turned to ice. Code black wasn't in any manual. It wasn't supposed to exist. The voice continued, mechanical and precise. Multiple casualties. Requesting immediate extraction team. Authorization. Nightfall protocol. Sarah's training kicked in, but her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Rule 847 was crystal clear. Any mention of Nightfall protocol requires immediate supervisor notification. But her supervisor's desk sat empty. Had been empty for 3 days. The smell of burnt coffee filled the dispatch center as emergency lights bathed everything in hellish red. Sarah could taste copper in her mouth, fear, or something worse. Ma'am, we need that extraction team now. We're losing containment. Containment. Another word that didn't belong in civilian emergency response. Sarah pulled up the restricted database, her clearance barely high enough to access the files. What she saw made her stomach drop. Facility 7 Alpha wasn't on any public map. It didn't officially exist. But the screaming in the background of the call was very, very real. How many casualties? She whispered. 17 confirmed. But that's not the problem. Silence stretched like a wire about to snap. The problem is what killed them is still loose. Sarah's screen flickered. New text appeared, words she'd never seen before. Level 9, breach protocol activated. Her hand shook as she reached for the red phone, the one she'd been told never to touch unless the world was ending. The plastic felt warm against her palm, almost alive. Ma'am, are you still there? Sarah closed her eyes. In her 8 years as a government operator, she'd followed every rule, no matter how strange. But this moment demanded a choice. Save lives and break protocol, or follow orders and let people die. The red phone's receiver felt heavy as lead as she lifted it. But before she could dial, her computer screen went black. Then, new words appeared in blood-red text. Sarah Chen, you have been selected. The call was still active. But now, something else was breathing on the line. The red phone screamed at 3:47 a.m. Sarah's hand trembled as she reached for it. 3 months into her classified position, she'd learned to fear that particular ring. It meant someone had broken Protocol 7. The voice on the other end was mechanical, distorted. Operator 4471, we have a code black breach. Caller has mentioned the underground facilities. Her blood turned to ice water. The training manual had been crystal clear about code black calls. Page 394, subsection C. Any civilian reference to classified government installations must be immediately transferred to Containment Division. No exceptions, no questions. But Sarah had never actually received one. The caller's voice crackled through her headset. A woman, sobbing, desperate. Please, you have to. Help me. My husband works at the facility beneath Denver International. He came home last night covered in something black. It's spreading across his skin like oil. Sarah's fingers hovered over the transfer button. Protocol demanded immediate handoff. But the woman's terror felt so raw, so human. Ma'am, I need you to stay calm, Sarah whispered, directly violating Rule 23. Never engage with code black callers. The woman's breathing became ragged. They told him it was just maintenance work. But he keeps talking about the children down there. Rows and rows of them, sleeping in glass tubes. He won't stop scratching at his arms. The temperature in Sarah's booth seemed to drop 10 degrees. Her supervisor's station remained dark. She was alone with this horror. The black stuff is moving under his skin now, the woman continued, like it's alive. And his eyes, God, his eyes have turned completely white. Sarah's screen flashed urgent warnings. Protocol violation. Transfer immediately. Containment Division standing by. But something in the woman's voice made her hesitate. A recognition. A truth that cut through all the government training. Ma'am, what's your location? Sarah asked, her career dissolving with each word. Silence stretched across the line like a held breath. Then the woman's voice returned, but different now. Calm. Cold. Mechanical. Thank you, Operator 4471. Your compassion has been noted. The line went dead. Sarah stared at her screen as new text appeared. Psychological evaluation initiated. Report to Sublevel 3. Immediately, her badge reader beeped softly. Someone was coming down the hallway, but the footsteps sounded wrong. Too many of them, moving in perfect synchronization. The elevator descended past floors that didn't exist on any building directory. Sarah's badge beeped at each security checkpoint. Red lights, green lights, the smell of ozone and something else. Something chemical that made her throat burn. Level Sub 7, the computerized voice announced. The doors opened to reveal a corridor lined with monitors. Dozens of them. Each screen showed a different 911 call center across the nation. But these weren't normal calls. Sarah watched operators fielding reports of weather balloons and gas leaks. The same scripted responses she'd been trained to give. The same lies she'd been telling for months. Welcome to the real Emergency Response Division, Director Hayes said behind her. The taste of copper filled Sarah's mouth. Fear. Recognition. On the largest monitor, a map of the United States pulsed with red dots. Thousands of them, each representing a call that had been redirected. Every UFO sighting, every unexplained disappearance, every report of government vehicles in remote areas. Hayes continued. They all come through here first. Sarah's hands trembled as she read the call logs scrolling past. Missing hikers who'd seen unusual aircraft. Farmers reporting livestock mutilations. Children describing men in black suits visiting their schools. All marked Protocol 7, suppress. The public can't handle the truth, Hayes said. So we handle it for them. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Cold. Sterile. The sound of 1,000 secrets being buried. Sarah thought of Marcus. of his desperate voice on that final call, of how she'd followed protocol and redirected him to local authorities that didn't exist. "How many people have we silenced?" she whispered. Hayes smiled. The expression never reached his eyes. "Since 1952. Conservative estimate, 47,000 calls. But who's counting?" The monitors flickered. New calls coming in. More dots appearing on the map. More people who would never get the help they really needed. "The beautiful thing about emergency services," Hayes said, "is that people trust us completely. They call us in their darkest moments, and we decide what reality they're allowed to experience." Sarah's reflection stared back from the black screens. She looked like a stranger. "What happened to Marcus?" she asked. Hayes checked his watch. The metal band caught the harsh light. "Marcus Rodriguez? Incident report filed. Case closed. Nothing to worry about." But his smile widened, and Sarah realized that Marcus wasn't the only one who'd never made it home. The clock read 2:17 a.m. Her headset crackled with static. Then a child's voice broke through. "Please, someone help us. My mom won't wake up and there's smoke everywhere." Sarah's training screamed at her to follow protocol. Grid Zone 7 was forbidden territory during these hours. The government's rules were absolute, carved in stone by departments that existed in shadows. But the child's coughing grew worse. "Hello? Is anyone there?" The small voice wavered, desperate. "I can't find my baby sister." Sarah's supervisor, Agent Morrison, stood behind her workstation. His cold eyes reflected the green glow of monitoring screens. "Follow the rules, Operator Chen. That call doesn't exist." The smell of burnt coffee mixed with the antiseptic air of the bunker facility. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across rows of operators, all bound by the same impossible rules. Sarah closed her eyes. She remembered her first day when they'd shown her the consequences of disobedience. Operator Williams had responded to a Grid Zone 7 call 6 months ago. His desk sat empty now, his fate a whispered warning among the night shift. "Please don't leave me alone," the child whispered. Sarah's finger hovered over the response button. Every government manual, every classified briefing, every threat carved into her memory said the same thing. Grid Zone 7 calls were not her concern, but her conscience screamed louder than protocol. Morrison stepped closer, his breath cold against her neck. "Remember what happened to Williams, Chen. Some rules exist for reasons beyond your clearance level." The child's voice grew fainter. Background sound suggested spreading fire, structural damage. Time was running out. Sarah thought about her own daughter, sleeping safely at home, about the oath she'd taken to serve and protect, about the weight of following orders versus the weight of letting innocents die. Her hand moved toward the microphone. "Operator Chen." Morrison's voice carried a warning sharp as broken glass. "Step away from your station." Sarah's heart pounded against her ribs. The child's breathing grew labored through the static. She had seconds to decide. But what she chose next would reveal the true cost of government secrets. Sarah's hands trembled as she stared at the emergency protocol manual. Rule 47. Never question the nature of code black calls. Rule 52. Never attempt to trace restricted numbers. Rule 61. Never speak of what you hear after midnight. She had broken them all. The fluorescent lights above her workstation buzzed like angry wasps. The air conditioning hummed its mechanical lullaby, but sweat still beaded on her forehead. 3 weeks of following the government's twisted playbook had shattered something inside her. The calls came in waves now, always between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., always from numbers that didn't exist in any database, always requesting emergency services for locations that weren't on any map. "Action, what's your emergency? We need immediate extraction from Facility 7 Delta." "Sir, I don't show that location in our override code, Blackwater 77. Sarah's screen would flash red. New coordinates would appear, coordinates that led to empty fields, abandoned warehouses, places that shouldn't need emergency services, but she dispatched units anyway, because that was the rule. Tonight felt different. The weight of her headset pressed against her skull like a metal crown. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago, leaving a bitter film on her tongue. The phone rang. Not the emergency line, her direct supervisor line. Sarah Chen, operator 4471. You've been asking questions. The voice was mechanical, filtered through layers of digital distortion. It sounded like death speaking through a broken radio. I follow protocol, sir. Protocol doesn't include accessing restricted files. Her blood turned to ice water. The computer screen in front of her flickered, showing her search history from 3 nights ago. Files marked classified. Documents about Project Silent Bell, experiments on unwilling subjects, government facilities that didn't officially exist, and operators trained to coordinate cover-ups instead of rescues. You have 2 choices, Operator Chen. The building's heating system clicked off. Silence wrapped around her like a burial shroud. Continue following the rules, or join the people you've been sending help to. Sarah's finger hovered over the emergency panic button hidden beneath her desk. The one they told her was for active shooters. Now she wondered what it really did. The choice is yours. But remember, we know where you live. We know about your sister in Portland. We know about your mother's medical bills. The line went dead. Sarah sat in the artificial twilight of the dispatch center, surrounded by the soft glow of emergency monitors. She reached for her mouse, clicked on a new file marked Eyes Only, but what she found inside made her realize the rules weren't meant to protect the public. They were meant to protect the government from people like her. The call came in at 3:47 a.m. Sarah's headset crackled with static. The voice on the other end was calm. Too calm. What's your emergency? I need to report a death. Sarah's fingers hovered over her keyboard. Protocol demanded she gather information, location, name, circumstances, but the caller continued before she could speak. The death hasn't happened yet, but it will. In exactly 17 minutes. The training manual had prepared her for many things. Drunk callers, pranks, mental health crises. But never this. Sir, I need you to explain what you mean by Sarah Michelle Chen, badge number 4471, shift supervisor Patricia Williams. You've been working dispatch for 3 years, 2 months, 16 days. The blood drained from her face. Her badge lay face down on her desk. She hadn't given her name. How do you know that? Because I know everything about Protocol 77, the one they never told you about. Sarah's hands trembled as she reached for the emergency supervisor button. But something stopped her. The caller's voice carried a weight she recognized. Truth. Every 911 operator receives the same training. The voice continued. 97 protocols. Life and death situations, medical emergencies, active shooters, natural disasters. The dispatch center hummed around her. 12 other operators fielding calls, none of them aware that everything they believed was a lie. But Protocol 77 is different. It's the one that comes after all the others fail, when the system itself becomes the emergency. Sarah's screen flickered. New text appeared in green letters. Protocol 77. Activated. You see it now, don't you? The caller's breathing was steady, mechanical. The protocol that turns operators into something else, the one that makes you choose. Her supervisor, Patricia, walked past, coffee in hand. Normal, routine, unaware that Sarah's screen now displayed classified information that shouldn't exist. Choose what? Sarah whispered. Whether to save the people calling for help or save the people who've been watching you. Save them. The green text pulsed. 16 minutes, 12 seconds. Sarah, you've been training for this moment since your first day. Every call you've taken, every life you've saved. It was all preparation. Her headset crackled again. But this time she heard something else. Footsteps, coming down the hallway toward the dispatch center. Heavy boots, multiple sets. They're coming for you now, the caller said softly. But Protocol 77 gives you one choice they never expected. The footsteps grew louder. The real horror hadn't even begun. Sarah's hands trembled as she reached for the emergency protocol manual. 3 weeks into her government contract, the calls had become unbearable. The fluorescent lights above her cubicle buzzed like dying insects. The air tasted of stale coffee and fear. "And what's your emergency?" The voice on the other end was a child. "Maybe 8 years old?" "There's something in my house," the girl whispered. "It's wearing my daddy's face." Sarah's training kicked in. Rule 47. Any call mentioning facial mimicry must be transferred to Department X within 30 seconds. Her finger hovered over the transfer button. But the child was crying now. Real tears. Real terror. "Please don't hang up," the girl begged. "It knows I'm calling. It's coming upstairs." Sarah's supervisor, Agent Morrison, appeared behind her. His breath smelled like cigarettes and secrets. "Transfer it," he commanded. Sarah looked at her screen. The caller's address flashed red. Classified location. Immediate transfer required. The girl's screams pierced through the static. "It's not Daddy anymore. It's something else. It's—" The line went dead. Sarah stared at her console. In 3 weeks, she'd transferred 47 calls to Department X. Children reporting shadow people. Adults describing neighbors who moved wrong. Families vanishing from towns that didn't exist on any map. None of those calls ever got follow-up reports. Morrison's hand landed heavy on her shoulder. His fingers felt cold through her uniform. "Good work, Thompson. You're learning." Sarah's stomach churned. The taste of bile mixed with the metallic air of the call center. "What happens to them?" she whispered. Morrison's smile never reached his eyes. "That's not your concern. Your job is to follow protocol, nothing more." But Sarah had been keeping her own records. Hidden in her apartment, she documented every transferred call, every strange rule, every child's voice that got cut off mid-scream. The pattern was becoming clear. The government wasn't responding to these emergencies. They were collecting them. Sarah's next call came in immediately. Another child, another impossible situation. This time she made a choice that would change everything. She didn't transfer the call. The red light blinked steady on my console, call after call, night after night. Each one a test I didn't know I was taking. The smell of stale coffee mingles with the antiseptic air of the dispatch center. My fingers hover over keys that have become extensions of my conscience. Rule 47 glows on my secondary monitor. Certain calls require immediate transfer to Department 19. No questions, no records. I've transferred 43 calls this month, 43 voices that simply disappeared from our system. 43 people whose emergencies became someone else's responsibility. Someone else's silence. The headset crackles. Another call. "Wavin, what's your emergency?" "Please, they're in my house. I can hear them moving upstairs. My daughter is—" I see the flag immediately. The address pings red. The caller's voice matches the profile parameters. Rule 47 activates. My hand moves toward the transfer button. Standard protocol. Clean hands. No involvement. But tonight, something breaks inside me. The woman's breathing echoes through my headset. Shallow. Terrified. Real. I think of all the transferred calls, all the voices that vanished into Department 19's black hole, all the times I followed orders without asking why. The choice crystallizes in the fluorescent light above my workstation. Follow the rules. Transfer the call. Keep my job, my clearance, my life simple, or break protocol. Help her myself. Face whatever consequences wait in the shadows. My supervisor's eyes find mine across the room. He knows. They always know. The red transfer button pulses like a heartbeat. The woman whispers again. Please. Someone has to help us. Someone has to help. How many times have I heard those words? How many times have I been that someone who chose not to? My finger hovers over the button. The weight of every transferred call presses down like concrete. In this moment, I understand the true purpose of the rules. Not to protect national security, to protect us from our own humanity, to make monsters feel like heroes, to transform witnesses into accomplices. The question isn't whether I'll follow orders tonight. The question is whether I can live with myself if I do. Every emergency call is a moral choice disguised as procedure. Every transfer button is a test of who we really are when no one's watching, except someone is always watching. And tonight, that someone is me. What would you choose when the rules demand your silence, but your conscience demands your voice? The fluorescent lights hum their final song in Emergency Operations Center 7. I sit at my console, staring at the screen that changed everything. The cursor blinks where Protocol 23 used to be listed. Deleted. Scrubbed. Like it never existed. My supervisor walks past, coffee steam rising from her mug. She doesn't look at me. None of them do anymore. The new manual sits heavy on my desk. Fresh ink. Clean pages. No mention of the calls that don't get answered. No mention of the coordinates that lead nowhere. No mention of the voices that weren't quite human. Congratulations, Director Walsh had said yesterday, his smile sharp as broken glass. You've been promoted to Level 1 clearance, Level 1, where you only know what they want you to know. I flip through the sanitized protocols. Standard emergency response, textbook procedures. Everything normal, everything safe, everything a lie. The red phone rings. My hand hovers over it, remembering the weight of those other calls, the screams that echoed from places that shouldn't exist. But this is different. This is real. Hachi, what's your emergency? Help me, a woman sobs. My husband. He's not breathing. I type the address. Dispatch ambulance. Follow protocol. Real protocol. As I work, I notice something taped under my desk. A note written in my own handwriting. Remember what you learned. Remember what they made you forget. My blood turns to ice. Water, because I don't remember writing it. I glance around the operations center. Dozens of operators, heads down, following their clean new rules, their sanitized protocols. How many of us have forgotten? How many have been promoted to safety? The woman on the phone is still crying, still real, still human. I help her. I save a life today. But somewhere, in a facility that doesn't exist, other phones are ringing. Other operators are following rules that shouldn't be followed. And tomorrow, they'll promote someone else to Level 1 clearance. The cycle continues. The machine keeps running, because the most terrifying truth isn't what they made us do. It's how easily they made us forget. In a world where information is power, what happens when the people meant to save us can't remember who we're really serving? Every emergency call is a choice between truth and safety. Every protocol, a line between humanity and something else entirely.